Hi everyone and welcome to Book Boop. My name is Rachel and welcome to another one of my recent reads video where I talk about some books that I've read recently. Surprise, surprise. So I have 5 different books I'm going to talk about today that I have all read recently. I've got my trusty little notebook here with my notes in it so I can remember what I thought about the books, because even some of these books feels like it was a lifetime ago since I've read them. I don't have any of these books physically, but I will hold up a picture for you on my Kindle so you can see what the cover looks like and remember what book I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and jump in. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is called Don't Tell a Soul by Kirsten Miller. Look at this beautiful cover. I love it so much. It's so pretty and disturbing and creepy. My favorite kind of cover. This is a YA book that recently came out in January or February of 2021, so it's quite a recent release. In this story, we are following a young woman who has recently kind of had some tragic things and difficult things happen in her home life, and because of that, her mom doesn't know how to handle it and just sends her away to live with her uncle for a while. Her uncle lives in a small town outside of New York, very, very small town where people just don't trust outsiders. It's kind of like that small town where everyone knows where everybody's business. Her uncle owns this big mansion in the town that he is renovating to turn into like a bed and breakfast or like a fancy stay hotel kind of place. And he's actually recently had some tragic things happen as well. His wife actually passed away in a fire in this mansion that was believed to possibly be has started by his stepdaughter, and his stepdaughter is supposedly has gone crazy in the mansion, is now in like a mental institution. Anyways, so our main girl here that we're following here on the cover, she goes to live with her uncle, and while she is there, she actually decides that she wants to see if she can kind of unravel the mystery of what happened that fateful night when her aunt passed away in that fire, and whether or not her cousin was the one that killed her, and whether or not her cousin's actually crazy. So she kind of is trying to delve into the mystery of the specific mansion. And there's a lot of paranormal aspects to it as well, because this mansion is hearing a lot of bumps in the night and ghosts and things like that. So it's nice and spooky, which I absolutely love. Let's look at my notes here. So it was definitely a fun mix of mystery and paranormal. I enjoyed the setting of the tight-knit small town and an old remote manor with a dark past. I found that I really enjoy settings. Excuse me, my voice is going out. I really enjoy settings where there's a small town where people just sort of don't really trust outsiders, and I don't know. I love that kind of setting for some reason. I just think it's really, really fun. I really liked the main character a lot, but it was a bit frustrating to have her past revealed slowly, traumatic past events. So at the very beginning of the book, we're kind of told that this girl had a traumatic experience, and then this is why she's sent off to kind of stay with her uncle and be somewhere else for a while. And it's one of those instances where we're like given bits and pieces of what this traumatic experience was throughout the book, which can kind of get a little frustrating because sometimes you're like, stop teasing me with it. Just tell me what it is. Come on. So eventually we do get the story, but it is a little annoying that it's kind of dangled in front of you and like you get tiny pieces and then it's pulled away, which can be a little frustrating sometimes, to be perfectly honest. But in the end, like, it was worth it, and I enjoyed like hearing this girl's story. I will say there are some trigger warnings for this book of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, as well as attempted rape. So there are some kind of trigger warnings in there, so just FYI on those. But that's the only thing that kind of frustrating a little bit is when any book does that, just kind of gives you little hints of some kind of thing that happened to them, or even if like something is never explained, which thankfully did not happen in this book. But sometimes they'll even authors will hint at some traumatic thing or something that happened to them, but we never get the full story, but it's hinted at a lot. That's always so frustrating. It has a good pace and build up, but I felt like it wrapped up way too quickly. It felt like final closure in this book was told to me instead of experienced, which is very out of character for the way the rest of this book is written. So this book, in this story, we're following this girl and we're unraveling the mystery with her and learning these things with her. So we're experiencing what she's learning as she goes. And then I feel like at the end, we're kind of told the wrap up, and it's kind of wrapped up very quickly, it feels like, and we're just sort of told and explained really quick to wrap up the mystery, and which felt very out of character for the way the rest of the story was told. So it just felt very rushed at the end, to be honest. So the ending, it was satisfying, and I liked the way the story concluded, but it just felt very rushed at the end. So that's the only thing I didn't particularly like about kind of how it was finished up. I give this 4 out of 5 stars. starting to fade on me there. I really liked it a lot. I thought it was a good mystery mix of paranormal and mystery, and kind of like having some difficult topics in there as well, and the small town atmosphere, and I really liked it. So I highly recommend it. All right, let's move on to the next one. Let's talk about a middle grade, shall we? So this one is one that sounded super sweet. Let me find the cover here. It's called The Language of Spells by Garret, Weyr. I believe that's how it's pronounced. And in this story, we are following this lovely little dragon here on the top cover. His name is Grisha, and we follow him and his story about being in a world that kind of set in the early 1900s, I believe. And in this world, like, dragons have kind of been a commonplace thing up until that time, and now there are far fewer dragons. And the first half of the story, we follow Grisha and kind of his birth through kind of like some experiences he has in his life, until he meets this little girl that he befriends, and they have this so precious friendship. It is so sweet. And they both kind of go onto a mission to find out what has happened to all the other dragons, because there were lots of dragons that just disappeared. And so they kind of work together to find out what happened to all these other dragons. And their friendship is so precious. Oh my goodness. Let's look at my notes here, because I want to make sure I remember what I thought about this book. It's a beautifully written book about a sweet dragon and his darling friendship with a little girl. I enjoyed the first half of the book more with Grisha's backstory. I really enjoyed being in Grisha's head and kind of hearing like how he grew up and how he learned things and the culture kind of things with dragons. And in this book, the dragons can talk and everything, and so we get to hear a lot of sort of like how he thinks and feels, and dragons live a very long time, and so just the things that he has seen in his lifetime was very interesting. The plot and some magical concepts lost me toward the end. In the second half of the book, when Grisha meets this girl and they become friends and everything, and they start to delve into this mystery of what happened to these dragons, we're introduced to some different magical concepts that aren't really explained. They're just sort of dropped in there and like, this is how it is, which usually I don't necessarily have trouble with that necessarily, but I had a little bit of trouble wrapping my head around some of the magical concepts, just like shape-shifting people that could turn from cats to humans, and like the wizard, like this main wizard that kind of we had in there. I don't know. Some of the magical concepts felt a little bit too abstract for me, and just I didn't feel like connected to the story well, so I struggled with that, to be perfectly honest. So I enjoyed the first half of the book more, even though I really enjoyed their friendship. The mystery aspect of it tended to kind of delve into different areas of magic that I felt were a little bit confusing, to be honest. The plot and some, I already said that, sorry, beautiful illustrations. There's some gorgeous black and white illustrations in here that are very similar, the same artwork to the cover, and they're so pretty. They really add to the story a lot, and they're lovely illustrations. The ending in this book was definitely not what I expected. I, of course, don't want to spoil anything in the ending, but I will say, as a middle grade, this did not end the way middle grades normally end. A lot of times when you read books that are for younger readers, a lot of times they are wrapped up with a nice little bow, the very happily ever after kind of aspect of it. This one ended, not necessarily open-ended, but it ended in a way that felt not as neat. And I actually really liked that. It was unexpected. I did not expect a book to end this way, especially with the way it was written, because it was a very like heartwarming story, very whimsical, lots of focus on friendship, and I really loved that about the book. And then the ending just sort of ended in a way that I just didn't expect, but I actually really appreciated and really loved. Of course, I'm not going to tell you what the ending was or anything like that, but it didn't feel so wrapped up in a bow, basically. And I actually really enjoyed that about the book, and I appreciated it. So I get this 3 out of 5 stars. It was kind of middle of the road for me. I think just because the first half of the book I really loved, the second half I had a little bit of disconnect with, but overall this is such a sweet story, and I highly recommend for a nice little sweet magical middle grade with an unexpected ending. All right, let's move to one that had so much hype for the longest time, and I was really nervous about reading it because I was afraid that the hype was going to get to me, and that is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. In this story, we are following this young woman who is hoping to become kind of like this head librarian in this library that she's been living in her whole life. But what's different about libraries in this world is that the books actually are alive and have personalities. Think of like like the book of magical creatures from Harry Potter. So think of like, it can like munch on you, it has like the teeth, and like it just has sort of like a little personality. Or whenever Harry's kind of like going through the library at Hogwarts, and some of the books like scream or make noises, or so think about that. So these are called grimoires, and she is wanting to become kind of like a head librarian, and right now she's like an apprentice librarian, I believe, and she's lived in this library her entire life. And usually orphans are the ones that are chosen to become librarians, because it's actually a very dangerous job, because some of the grimoires are relatively harmless, but some of them are extremely dangerous and have very dark magic in them, or they're just very dangerous books, and can honestly kind of almost like, some of them are strong enough they could like control a person or that kind of thing, and so they can be very dangerous. On top of that, a grimoire also can develop and turn itself into a monster, and once that happens, it can become very dangerous and hurt and kill a lot of people, and so it's dangerous to be a librarian. Anyways, in this story, though, we're told this in the synopsis, that a grimoire ends up turning into a monster, and she ends up being blamed for that, even though it's not necessarily her fault. She ends up being blamed for it, and the rest of the story is kind of about her dealing with that and trying to clear her name and all those kind of things. And that's kind of all I would hear about this story, and that was normally explained when I heard it on booktube videos and all that kind of stuff. And there was a lot of raving about it, and also some people that were disappointed with it. It seemed like you either loved this book or you hated it. I will say I was pleasantly surprised with this book, and I'm so thankful for that. It was such an unexpected read, so much more involved in the story than I had anticipated. I enjoyed the romance in this story, and that it's not the main focus. I am not a huge romance reader. I'm not the kind of person that likes books where the main focus is a romance, which can happen a lot in YA. This is a YA book. And I enjoyed the fact that, yes, there's a romance in it, and I liked the romance that was in it. But I like the fact that it wasn't the main focus, and it also wasn't something that really affected the main protagonist's choices. Like, they didn't overly attach themselves to the love interest to where it affected their choices and what they wanted to do or who they wanted to be. And I really love that about this character. This character was so strong, and I loved her. I loved the fact that throughout the book, it was constantly reminded to you, not in an annoying way, but reminded to you like that, first of all, she's very tall. She's this very tall woman, and that could be off-putting to some people, and how she was clumsy, but also she was just very strong personality of knowing what was right, knowing what she believed in, and willing to stand for that. And I loved that about her. I love the fact that even though her love interest didn't agree with her opinions or agree with what she wanted to do, she didn't bend to that. She wasn't like, oh, the guy I have the hots for doesn't like what I'm doing. And, she wasn't like that. I loved that. I loved it about her. She was like, no, I'm right. I'm going to do this. And I loved that about her personality. I thought it was so great. I loved Silas's character. There's a character in here named Silas, and he is a demon basically, and I really liked his character. I loved his character so much. I'm not going to go on about it too much if you haven't read this, because I don't want to just blabber on about something that you don't know about, that you won't care about right now because you haven't read it. But Silas is just a really fun character, and I really liked him a lot. It felt a bit long at times, but overall it's an enjoyable read. I love the idea that books have personalities. I love the grimoire aspect and all these like libraries with all these books that some of them were funny, like they would be in a glass case, and there was this one book that would throw a tantrum if it wasn't complimented at least once a day. There was another one that would like sing operatically. It was just really, really funny, like all these books and their little personalities and egos, and it's adorable. This book is definitely great for book lovers. I think it's mainly kind of written for people that really love books and love going to the library and bookstores and things like that. It's just an ode to that with a big fantasy spin. So I did recommend this one. I actually gave it 3.5 stars. I can't decide if it's a 3.5 and a 4. Can't decide. But I really enjoyed this. This was unexpected for me, and there was way more to it, way more to the story than I thought there would be, and I loved it. So don't take the synopsis of like at face value of like, oh, this is all there is to this book. There's so much to the story, and it was so fun. So I highly recommend this one, Sorcery of Thorns. It was a good time. All right, I've got 2 more to talk about here. This next one is kind of within my wheelhouse because I love spooky books. Let me find the book here. Okay. It's called Craven Manor by Darcy Coates. I recently found out by looking kind of like at Darcy Coates' books, I noticed that this author mainly writes spooky books, which is everything to me. I love reading spooky books. I grew up reading Mary Downing Hahn, who writes children's ghost stories and like spooky stories, and I love that. And so this ended up being like a cozy read for me. In this story, we are following this young man who is down and out on his luck. He's having trouble holding down jobs to be able to make enough money to live off of. He ended up being homeless for a little bit, and then his cousin took him in, and he's been living with his cousin and trying to help out with the rent there. And he's just struggling finding a good job to get himself on his feet. Until one day, he is offered a job to be a groundskeeper for this manor called Craven Manor that's in the middle of nowhere. It's this derelict, falling apart manor, and he's been offered a really good amount of money as well as lodging to be the groundskeeper of this manor. And even though he's never really actually met the person that offered him the job, and even though it seems creepy and shady as all get out, he's desperate, and so he takes the job. And on top of that, this manor ends up being spooky, creepy, haunted, and he has to like figure out the mystery of this dark, creepy manor, which sounds fantastic. It's spooky, and there's a big, dark, creepy manor in the middle of the woods. What else do you want? Am I right? So, all right, and this was a cozy read for me. Reminded me of some spooky middle grades that I love to read, even though I believe this is a YA. Could be maybe an adult, but I think it was more of a YA. Good, spooky, atmospheric setting. Enjoyed our main protagonist, his reactions and choices. Sometimes when you read books that are spooky or horror, especially if you're watching like a movie, like a scary movie, sometimes you're just like, why are you going to do that? You know you're gonna die. You know this, you get frustrated with the protagonist. And this one, I felt like he had good reactions to what was happening, which I appreciated. He didn't do stupid things. I felt like he was smart about what was going on. Obviously, he's in a tight spot and is taking this job that is shady, but at the same time, like, he's smart about things that are happening, which I appreciated. I liked that about him. Some plot twists felt a little bit campy, which I don't think is quite the right word to use, but some of the plot twists felt a little bit expected in a way. Like, I didn't really think they were surprising, even though I think they were supposed to be. But overall, I enjoyed my time reading it, even if I kind of could guess some of the plot twists. There was one character in particular who was kind of, I guess you could kind of say is a villainous character, that he ended up being more involved in the plot than I would have liked. There were some confrontations with kind of like antagonists that felt convenient. That just is like, oh, he's here again, making trouble again. I don't know. It just, sometimes this antagonist, at one point in the story, I thought we were done with him, and we were like, okay, he's to the side now, but he kept reappearing, and I'm like, why? So there's some plot twists and some confrontations that I felt like were a little bit tropey or campy, or I don't know, I can't think of the right word, but I don't know, they just didn't rub me the right way. Overall, this was a fun, spooky snack of a read. So it's like just a little popcorn snack, just having a good time, being a little spooked. I'm looking forward to reading another one because Darcy Coates has a lot of these in the similar vein. I ended up giving this one also 3 out of 5 stars, so middle of the road, but it's just a fun, spooky story. So I recommend, if you're looking, especially in the fall, if you're looking for some like nice, spooky reads that are easy and quick, definitely look up Darcy Coates, because this author has a ton of books that are in this vein. They're not like massive, huge books or anything, and I think they'd be great for the fall. So, all right, I got one more to talk about. Also, I apologize if my camera keeps refocusing. I keep glancing up and seeing it like do this and like go in and out. So I apologize if it's doing that a lot. That's gotta be annoying. Okay, so one more. This one was a little surreal to read, and I knew it would be going into it, and it's called In the Shadow of Blackbirds by Kat Winters. This story takes place in the early 1900s. It takes place during the World War and also the Spanish influenza epidemic. It takes place in America, and it's also focusing mainly on the fact that spiritualism was really on the rise during this time. Obviously, because of the war and the Spanish influenza epidemic, a lot of people were dying. And so a lot of people were turning towards the idea of spiritualism, having seances to talk to dead relatives or friends or lovers, or also in this case, in the cover, having these spiritual photographs taken where you have your photograph taken and you're hoping that the ghost of whoever you're mourning will be in the picture with you and is like, to comfort you or something like that. And a lot of people were faking these spiritualistic occurrences with the photos, like making money off people that were mourning, basically, and making these double exposed pictures to make it look like there was a spirit there standing next to you and things like that. So we are following this girl during the time period, and she is going to stay with her aunt. And her aunt is working in one of the munitions factories, I think. So think like Rosie the Riveter kind of thing. And her aunt's doing that. And she and the girl that we're following here, her, I guess, boyfriend or longtime friend, friends to lovers kind of thing. Her longtime friend that she's fallen in love with has gone off to the war. He ends up dying in the war. And up to this point, she doesn't really believe in the spiritualism thing. She thinks it's all a hoax and that people are making money off people that are mourning, until she actually starts to have these paranormal experiences of like seeing her like friend slash boyfriend, his ghost, and like experiencing paranormal things with him. And so it kind of falls along that, and there's like a mystery aspect to it and everything. And I feel like I'm being very confusing with this description. Hopefully that made some sort of sense. But in this one, it was a very surreal setting for pandemic, because obviously we're still experiencing pandemic stuff. Thankfully, we're kind of starting to get in the out of that, but we've had COVID and everything. And so this was very surreal to be reading about people who were afraid to go out and were wearing masks. And if you happen to cough or sneeze in public, everyone would look at you like you were a pariah and would like back up. And then there was lots of weird like wives' tale kind of things that you would do to kind of ward off the flu. Like apparently like onions, the idea of onions and garlic, people thought that would ward the flu off, and so people were eating a lot of onions, tons of onion soup, just eating onions and garlic, and wearing like garlic garlands, and it makes you think like people were trying to ward off vampires or something. But there was just lots of strange things with that, and just like the whole thing of just seeing constantly having death, just feeling it's nipping at your heels, and just that feeling of like you could die at any time and anybody could get the flu, and it was like a death sentence to get the flu. And it was just it's a very surreal, terrifying thing to read about, especially since in our lifetime now we have lived through a pandemic. And it was just a very surreal setting, to be perfectly honest. I'm glad I read it towards the end of the pandemic versus the beginning, because it would have been really scary. Like I said, it's weird to hear all the strange home remedies. It focused on spiritualism during war and the pandemic. The setting of this story and the time period in the story stuck with me more than the plot did. Not that the plot wasn't interesting. I liked the plot. However, the setting is what hit me the most. And I think it's just because of the pandemic sort of thing and the fear and all of that. The setting really hit me and stuck with me more than the plot. I have trouble remembering some of the plot. There was a lot of twists and turns. There's a lot of mystery to it, and it was really good, and I enjoyed the mystery, but the setting is what stuck with me. I enjoyed the mystery aspect of it. Overall, I gave this 3.5. Yeah, I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. So it was a good read. If a pandemic setting is something that you just aren't ready for, then I'd wait. I'd wait on reading this. Wait a few years down the road until you're able to look back and not be so freaked out. So I would hold back on that if that's something that's a little scary for you. But overall, if you like sort of that time period, kind of World War time period, and maybe if you're interested in kind of like maybe what the pandemic looked like for the flu pandemic, then there you go. So that was an interesting one as well. Nice little mix of books there, but those are some books that I have read recently. Let me know down below, please, if you've read any of these, what you thought about them. Also, thank you to some newer subscribers that have recently subscribed. I'm so glad you're here. Please comment down below, say hi. I love to talk to you. That's why I have this channel, is a chance to talk to other fellow bookworms. So let's chat down below. On this side of the video over here is my logo. If you click on that, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, you can subscribe that way. On this side of the video over here is a suggestion for another video if you want to watch another one right now. But thank you so much for watching. You rock, and don't forget to keep reading. Bye!